So the next day what happens is that, parties going on in Bishr's house. And, liquor, everything going on. And, Imam Musa Kadhim is walking by the house. And in the meantime, the slave girl comes out to throw something out. And Imam Musa Kadhim, she asks him, she says that, is the owner of this house, or he asked her, Imam Musa Kadhim asked her, that is the owner of this house a free man or a slave? And she says, of course, she's thinking, what kind of question is this? She's taken aback, and that's her thought process, and she says, this is, of course, the owner of this house is a free man. So Musa Kadhim, he says to her, he says, you are right, because if he was a slave, he wouldn't be behaving like this. Of course, what he means is something different. She didn't pick up on what he meant. But he says, if he was a slave, he would not be behaving like this. So she goes in and she tells Bishr. She says, this man was passing by and he asked me this question, and this is what I said. And then this is what he said. Bishr understood that if he was truly the slave of Allah, the way he should be the slave of Allah, he wouldn't be behaving like this. And so he immediately runs out of the house. Hafi is the one barefoot. And this became his name because he ran out of the house without his shoes to go and catch Imam Musa Kadhim. And he falls to his, at his feet, and he, repents to Allah. And this is where guidance came to him through Imam Musa Kadhim. And he becomes his disciple. And he never wore shoes from that day on. And when people asked him, why don't you wear shoes? He says, this is the condition I was in when guidance was sent to me. So this is a constant reminder for himself not to go back to what he used to be. Of course, we know Bahlul, who's also a disciple of Imam Musa Kadhim. Bahlul was known, Bahlul Dana, which means the very intelligent Bahlul, but most people thought of him as crazy. And it's not by accident, because he's a student of Imam Musa Kadhim. And when Harun was making plans to have Imam Musa Kadhim killed, he also intended on killing all of the students, or as many followers as he could. So Bahlul being in the court of Harun, he was a government official. He comes running to Imam Musa Kadhim and he says that this is the plan. This is what they plan on doing. So, you need to get out. Imam Musa Kadhim, he simply says Jim. That's all he said. He says Jim. So some of the students, they took Jim to mean Jabal, the mountains. So they ran off into the mountains. Some of the students took it to mean Jabal Watan, which means to be exiled. So they left and went into foreign lands. Bahlul took Jim to mean Junoon, means crazy. So he starts pretending like he's crazy. So people don't mess with him. The government's, crazy person. What are you going to do with a crazy person? But if you listen to the advice that he gave in that state, you realize he's not crazy. And of course, Musa Kadhim has many other great students. Again, this is, as I said, there's so many things that happened this month. This is the month, at the end of this month is when Imam Hussein al-Islam will leave Medina Munawwara to go to Mecca. When the letter is sent to the governor of Medina, to basically force him to make bay'ah or to execute him. This is also the month of the Miraj, the night journey of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I'm just going to say a few words on that. We're not going to go over the whole journey, and we've done that in the past. Or at least not even, you never can go over the whole journey. This is a journey that in reality took eons. Yet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he returned to his bed, the bed was still warm and the chain was still swinging. Time stopped for him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because he, in reality, is the essence of the universe. He is the soul of the universe. And when the soul goes, everything else stops. So, one thing when we talk about this journey, just a few lessons, and maybe I'll continue on next week, inshallah. This journey for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not something new. And when we read about it, we think, oh, this is something that was new for him. No, it's new for us. For us to know it was something new. But for him, this was not new. No. And the more difficult thing to understand shouldn't be the journey itself, shouldn't be his going, but it should be his coming back. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this in the Quran. When he talks about the going, and we've talked about this so many times, when he talks about the going, he starts off with Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi. Pure is the one who took his servant. Laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa. Asra is a journey by night, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala re-emphasizes it with laylam, with layl, which is night. This isn't redundancy. A lot of times when we speak, we redundantly are saying the same thing over and over. This isn't redundancy. This is an emphasis that this was simply a portion of the night. This was, in reality, a moment in time. Yet within that moment, all of these things happened. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he travels from Mecca to Masjid al-Aqsa, and from Aqsa to the first heaven, to the second, the third, the fourth, so on, to Sidrat al-Muntaha, which is the edge or the limits of the universe, to La Makan, which is no place. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be confined to any place. Every place is the creation of Allah. Allah existed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no beginning. And so everything else is His creation. He is the sole creator, and everything other than Him is creation. But He was before creation. Place is also creation. And so if He existed before creation, then how can He cannot be confined to place. This is why when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam describes the journey, he talks about going from place to place to place. But then when he talks about Allah, he says, La makan, no place. Which, even though we say this, the reality is we cannot comprehend this. He told us this for us to have a glimpse, but we cannot comprehend it. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself cannot be comprehended. Our minuscule minds, it's interesting. You think about the mind, right? Our brains. You think about like neuroscience. The brain is studying the brain. And the brain doesn't know what the brain is doing. We're getting hints now with some technology that, this portion of the brain does this and this portion does this. But still, okay, but how does all that work? And when something goes wrong, why does it go wrong? So the brain can't even comprehend our own brain. And then we think that we're going to comprehend Allah. Yeah. And it doesn't work that way. Yeah. So even when we look at this journey, and it is truly a miraculous journey. But again, as I said, the coming back is more miraculous than the going. Because when he talks about the coming back, here he says, Subhanalladhi asra bi'abd. And there he says, Wan najmi idha hawa. He swears by the coming back of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The najm there, the star, is singular. It's not nujum. So it's talking about one specific star. Who is that star? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as he comes back from this journey. But as I said in the beginning, this is not new for him. And this is why Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, when Abu Jahl comes and tries to, get him to leave Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he tells him, if somebody says that they traveled in one night from Mecca to Jerusalem and back, what would you say? He said, I would say he's a liar. And he says, well, your friend Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying this. He says, well, if he's saying it, it's true. But he didn't stop there. He says, because I see more miraculous things from him every day. I mean, what you're telling me for him is nothing. His maqam, his status is beyond that. He says, every day I see more miraculous things from him. And of course, this is when he's given that title of As-Siddiq, for affirming the truthfulness of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with absolutely no doubt. It's not like, well, maybe or maybe not. No. Absolutely no doubt. No second thought. If he says it, that's it. This is why, Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh, he said, even if Jannah and Jahannam, even if the garden and the fire were placed in front of me today, it would not change my iman. Why? Because simply Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying it is better than me seeing it. We've talked about this before when the son of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ibrahim, passed away. And after they buried him, and one day Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he comes to the house and he sees the mother of Ibrahim, Maria Qabdiya radiallahu anha. She is crying. She has her head down crying. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked her, why are you crying? She says, I remember my son, the memory of my son. And he says to her, look up and see him playing in Jannah. And she keeps her head down. And he says it to her again. and she keeps her head down. And he says it again, and she keeps her head down. And then he asks, he says, why didn't you look up? She says, Ya Rasulullah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Your saying it is better than me seeing it. Because my eyes can make a mistake, but what you say can never be wrong. I kind of diverged here. We'll talk a little bit more about the night journey next week, inshallah. I'll stop here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to understand, and may He fill our hearts with His true love and the true love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of those whom they love. And may He give strength and victory to all of our brothers and sisters throughout the world that are being oppressed, and give them victory over their oppressors, wherever they may be, whether Gaza or Palestine or Kashmir or Sudan or Yemen. And may He allow us to be useful to them. Those who have not made sunnah, go ahead and make sunnah, inshallah.